By the time the Luftwaffe began seriously considering the problem of night interception, the war had already exposed uncomfortable truths. Low-key German experiments into visual night interception had been conducted during the latter stages of the First World War. But those efforts had been limited, tentative, and largely forgotten. When the Luftwaffe was reformed in 1935, interest in night fighting resurfaced, though still without urgency. A series of tests followed using single-engine fighters such as the Arado AR-68, the Heinkel He-112, and the Messerschmitt Bf-109. Results were encouraging, but inconclusive. Coordinated searchlights, reliable radio communication, and disciplined ground control showed promise. In certain circumstances, bombers could be caught, sometimes even shadowed long enough for a kill. But these were isolated successes. Flak units, officially part of the Luftwaffe, played a significant role in destroying night raiders. Many senior officers, including Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, believed anti-aircraft guns alone might suffice. That assumption would prove dangerously optimistic. Across Europe, military thinking before the war had centered overwhelmingly on offensive air power. Britain and Germany alike built air forces designed primarily to strike, not defend. The RAF emphasized range and payload, equipping its bombers to reach targets deep within Germany. Many aircraft incorporated increasingly modern defensive turrets, allowing fire in almost every direction. By September 1939, RAF Bomber Command possessed 23 frontline squadrons, totaling nearly 280 aircraft. The Germans initially responded to daylight incursions with a coordinated system of radar detection, fighter interception, and flak defenses. This approach achieved early successes, but mostly in daylight. Losses forced Britain to shift increasingly toward night bombing. And that changed everything. Small beginnings. In the early months of the war, German night defense rested primarily on the Bf-109, a superb day fighter, but far from ideal for nocturnal interception. Operating alongside searchlights, its cockpit canopy reflected glare so intensely that pilots sometimes removed sections simply to see. Before the war, only a handful of units had been assigned a true night fighting role. Among them was Nachtjagd II, equipped with the Bf-109D. In April 1940, a Staffel was deployed to Aalborg in Denmark, sharing facilities with ZG-76 under Wolfgang Falk. Falk would soon emerge as one of the most influential figures in the entire development of German night fighting. Early operations were improvised. Fighters intercepted RAF bombers during twilight hours, when some natural light remained. Falk observed that aircraft guided by ground-controlled interception, what would later become known as GCI, achieved more reliable results. Ground radar plots allowed controllers to vector fighters into approximate positions before visual contact. It was crude, but it worked. The few RAF bombers shot down were enough to convince senior officers, including Werner Streib and Walter Ely, that the Bf-110, originally conceived as a heavy day fighter, might prove effective at night. Falk prepared a detailed report. That report, though unintended, marked him as Germany's leading authority on night fighting. The reality of the threat. British early war raids were limited, often small-scale operations of fewer than 40 aircraft. On the night of May 11 to 12, 1940, 37 aircraft struck Mönchengladbach. It was the first time high explosives hit a German town. Days later, on May 15 to 16, the RAF launched its first strategic bombing operation against German industry. 16 targets in the Ruhr were attacked by nearly 100 bombers. Damage was light. Losses were minimal. But the message was unmistakable. German airspace was vulnerable. RAF crews often operated individually or in small formations, unaware they were presenting ideal, isolated targets for night fighters. At this stage, German night interception doctrine remained rooted in World War I methods, searchlights illuminating targets for fighters waiting nearby. There seemed little reason to change, until the scale of the threat grew. Kammhuber and the defense system. With the formation of the first formal night fighter unit, searchlight regiments were assigned alongside fighter Gruppen headquarters. Ground radar installations expanded steadily, covering likely approach routes into the Reich. Overseeing this developing defensive network was Oberst Josef Kammhuber. Kammhuber, a brilliant organizer, was given responsibility not only for tactics, but for procurement, personnel, training, and ground control coordination. Drawing heavily from Zerstörer units, he made the Bf-110 the primary aircraft of the Nachtjagd. Performance comparisons were revealing. The British Wellington could manage approximately 235 miles per hour. The Whitley reached around 192 miles per hour. The Hampton achieved about 254 miles per hour. The Bf-110, by contrast, could reach 349 miles per hour, climb above 32,000 feet, and carried formidable cannon and machine gun armament concentrated in its nose. On paper, interception seemed straightforward. In practice, it was anything but. The Bf-110 was not alone. Modified Dornier bombers, including the Do-17Z and Do-215, were tested as night fighters. Though bulky and underpowered, they provided valuable experimental platforms. The Ju-88C eventually emerged as a more versatile solution, combining endurance, space for equipment, and strong performance. Crews adapted constantly. Armament configurations varied. Pilots debated the merits of heavy versus lighter cannon. A key consideration was avoiding muzzle flash that might destroy night vision. There was no universal standard. Innovation often occurred at squadron level. Aircraft camouflage evolved as well. Initially, black undersides were adopted. Later experimentation revealed lighter grays and whites could prove more effective under certain conditions. By 1943, however, black would dominate Nachtjagd aircraft finishes. A symbol for the night. To foster esprit de corps, Wolfgang Falck pushed for a distinct emblem. From a design competition emerged the Silver Falcon, inspired by the Mulders family coat of arms, set against a sky background. Later, the sky blue was replaced with black. The emblem spread rapidly across Nachtjagd units. It was more than decoration. It symbolized a new identity within the Luftwaffe, a force fighting not for daylight dominance, but for survival in darkness. Early successes, and hard lessons. Falck's blunt assessment of early RAF raids reportedly drew sharp attention. When asked to explain the difficulty of night interception to laymen, he famously said, "Switch off all the lights in the room and try to catch a fly with your hands." Despite the challenge, the first successes came. On July 9, 1940, Oberfeldwebel Paul Forster intercepted and shot down a Whitley illuminated by searchlights over Heligoland. Soon after, Werner Streibe destroyed another Whitley over the Ruhr, closing to within 300 yards before opening fire. Flames erupted from the bomber's wing. Crew members bailed out. RAF records confirmed the loss. These victories were small, but symbolically vital. Organization and expansion. On July 17, 1940, a night fighter division was formally established under Kammhuber. Headquarters were set up in Brussels. Command posts expanded. New Gruppen formed from existing Zerstörer units. Aircraft inventories diversified. Experimental technologies, including infrared detection devices such as the Spanner, were tested, though with limited success. Operational doctrine evolved continually. Crews were required to identify targets clearly before claiming destruction. Only two categories were recognized: destroyed or probable. A confirmed kill required visible fire or impact. A point system similar to that used in daylight fighter units was introduced. 500 points might earn an Iron Cross First Class, though this system was later replaced by assessments based on operational flights and length of service. Night fighting demanded flying in virtually all weather conditions. Cloud cover, fog, overcast skies, these were common obstacles. Pilots who attempted to climb above weather systems risked penalties if they abandoned assigned sectors. Searchlights remained essential. Their beams, often forming vast cones of light, not only illuminated bombers but occasionally ensnared friendly fighters. To mitigate this, Very cartridges were fired to warn ground units of friendly aircraft in the area. The entire system, radar, searchlights, flak and fighters, operated as an integrated defensive web. And yet, despite all efforts, bombers still got through. The Nachtjagd would continue to expand, adapt and refine its methods. It would produce experts, innovators and tacticians whose names would become synonymous with night fighting. But at this stage in 1940, it was still a force learning through urgency, improvisation, and necessity. The war in darkness had truly begun. Send the next section whenever you're ready, and I will continue seamlessly into the next part of the chapter.